You ever notice how betrayal doesn't knock politely? It just barges in, uninvited, grabs a drink, and makes itself comfortable like it owns the place. That's how it felt the night I realized my wife, Claire, wasn't the woman I married. It started at dinner. Not a fancy anniversary dinner, not a big family gathering. Just a Tuesday night steak and potatoes kind of deal. I had the grill smoking outside, the table set, even uncorked a bottle of her favorite Cabernet, because somewhere in the back of my stubbornly optimistic brain, I still believed we had a marriage worth polishing. She walked in late. Not late from work. Late from somewhere. The heels clicking across the hardwood weren't hers. Claire hadn't worn heels for me in months. But she wore them tonight. Hair freshly done. Makeup sharp enough to draw blood. Big meeting? I asked, casually cutting into my steak. She smirked, pouring herself a glass of wine. Something like that. The something like that was my first red flag of the night. The second came when her phone buzzed on the counter, and she flipped its screen down faster than a blackjack dealer with a hot hand. "Who's that?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "No one important," she said, stabbing her salad a little too forcefully. "Funny," I said, leaning back. "That no one important sure makes you smile like you just hit the lottery." Her fork clinked against the plate. "Don't start, Mark." Now, I'm not the kind of man who throws accusations without a net. I'd been watching her, the late nights, the sudden gym obsession, the new perfume that somehow never wafted my way. I'd been one step ahead, quietly collecting puzzle pieces while she thought she was playing me blind. So I smiled. Not the cheerful kind. The kind that says I already know, and I'm just waiting for you to hang yourself with the rope you don't even realize you're holding. "All right," I said calmly. "No starting. Just dinner." But that was the thing. It wasn't just dinner. It was the opening scene to a play she didn't know I'd already memorized. Because tomorrow, when she thought she'd have the upper hand, I was going to turn the whole script upside down. That night, Claire slipped into bed after midnight. I wasn't asleep, hadn't been for weeks, if we're being honest, but I kept my eyes closed. She smelled faintly of cologne that didn't belong to me, the kind that announces itself before the door even clicks shut. She thought she was clever. She thought I was clueless. That was my advantage. I'd already found the emails. The ones where she told her friend, let's call him Derek the Discount Romeo, that she hadn't laughed this hard in years. That I was comfortable but boring. Comfortable. That word stung more than any curse she could have used. The next morning, she breezed into the kitchen humming, like she hadn't just shattered her vows between the sheets of some motel, with complimentary breakfast spelled wrong on the sign outside. "You're up early," she said, pouring coffee into her favorite mug. My mug, technically, I bought it on our honeymoon. "Couldn't sleep," I answered, flipping through the paper. "Too much on my mind." She raised an eyebrow. "Work stress." Something like that. I didn't look up. I let her think she'd dodged the bullet. Here's the thing about Claire. She loved control. She thrived on being the one with the secret, the one pulling the strings. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already cut the strings. I'd been taking quiet notes, the receipts, the lies, the smirks when she thought I wasn't looking. And I had a plan. That evening, I told her I had to work late. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly and muttered, "Don't stay out too late." The irony almost made me laugh. Instead of heading to the office, I parked 2 blocks from the bar where I knew she'd meet him. And sure enough, there she was. Hair curled, lips painted, laughing that flirty laugh I hadn't heard in months. The laugh that used to be mine. And there he was, Derek, in a suit too expensive for his actual paycheck, leaning across the table like a man rehearsing for a role he'd never truly earn. I stayed outside. Didn't storm in. Didn't confront. I just watched. Calm. Patient. Because while she thought she was living a double life, I was already building her cage. I didn't barge into that bar. Oh no, that would have been too easy, too expected. Claire thrived on drama, and I wasn't about to give her the stage she wanted. Instead, I sat in my car across the street, watching them through the big window like a man in a movie theater. Their little performance, her laugh, his hand brushing hers, all of it was playing out exactly how I thought it would. She leaned in, whispering something in his ear. He grinned, cocky as a man who thinks he's just stolen another man's crown. I almost applauded. On my passenger seat sat a neat little folder. Inside, screenshots of her emails, timestamps of late-night workouts, and even a photo or two I'd had a friend take when she thought she was being slick. I wasn't collecting these because I wanted to confront her with them. No, I was collecting them because I had a much bigger endgame in mind. When I finally pulled away from the bar, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes when you realize you're not just a step ahead. You're playing a different game entirely. The next day, Claire strolled into the kitchen with that same smug glow, like the cat who not only ate the canary but also sold the feathers for profit. "Morning," she chirped, pouring herself coffee. "Morning," I said, folding the paper. "You're in a good mood." She smirked. "Just slept well." I raised an eyebrow, pretending not to know. "Must be nice." Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and quickly flipped it over. I sipped my coffee and smiled. "Claire," I said casually, "you ever wonder how well you actually hide things?" She froze for half a second. Just half. But I caught it. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and calculating, before she forced a laugh. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, standing and kissing her on the forehead. "Just curious." She thought she was in control. She thought she still had the upper hand. But what she didn't realize was that the board was already set, and I was the only one holding all the pieces. The thing about betrayal is it ages fast. At first, it's fresh and shiny, a thrill for the one doing it, a gut punch for the one on the receiving end. But eventually, the shine dulls. Lies get recycled, excuses start repeating, and that smug glow of confidence? It begins to flicker like a dying light bulb. That's where Claire was now. She didn't know it yet, but I could see the cracks forming in her perfect little crown. The setup. It was Saturday morning when I made my first move. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle shift in routine, the kind of thing a man does when he's been playing the long game. She came downstairs in one of those silk robes that used to drive me wild. I remember thinking how that same robe had probably been on the floor of some hotel room not long ago, and instead of rage, I felt a kind of cold amusement. "You're up early," she said, noticing the briefcase by the door. "Yeah," I replied, sipping my coffee. "Meeting a client. Might be gone a while." A flicker of suspicion crossed her face, tiny but noticeable. "On a Saturday? Some clients don't keep business hours," I said smoothly. "You know how it is." What she didn't know was that the briefcase was empty, and the only client I had was the truth, waiting patiently for the right stage. As I left, I caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She was already texting someone, probably arranging her little rendezvous. And I smiled. Let her. The quiet investigation. Instead of heading to any meeting, I drove across town to a small diner with terrible coffee and the best place for people watching. I slid into a booth with my laptop and opened the file I'd been building for weeks. Emails, screenshots, a hotel receipt I'd accidentally found in her purse, a string of late-night text messages where she called Derek the spark I needed. The spark. I chuckled to myself. Imagine thinking Derek was a spark when I was about to light an entire wildfire under her. I wasn't just gathering evidence for myself. No, I was packaging it. Polished, airtight, undeniable. Something that would hold up in any room, whether it was a lawyer's office, a courtroom, or a family dinner where she planned to play the victim. I knew Claire. She wouldn't just betray me. She'd twist it around until somehow I was the villain. That's who she was. A master of flipping the script. But not this time. Not with the stage already built and the spotlight waiting. The first slip. That evening, she came home later than usual. I was on the couch, pretending to watch the game. She walked in with her hair slightly messy, her smile a little too wide. "Long day?" I asked without looking up. "Yeah," she said quickly, heading straight for the bathroom. "Shopping with Kelly." Kelly, her poor scapegoat of a friend who, if interrogated, would probably swear she hadn't seen Claire in weeks. I muted the TV. Funny, I ran into Kelly earlier. She didn't mention it. There it was, the hesitation. A blink too long, a breath caught in her throat. She recovered quickly, but the damage was done. "Oh, must have slipped her mind," she said casually, shutting the bathroom door. I smiled at the blank TV screen. The first crack had widened. Testing the waters. The following week, I upped the pressure. Not confrontation. Oh no, that would have given her the satisfaction of a fight. Instead, I gave her something far more dangerous. Silence mixed with subtle reminders that I wasn't as clueless as she hoped. One night, I set her phone gently on the counter after she left it buzzing face down. "You should keep an eye on that," I said with a polite smile. "Wouldn't want someone important to go unanswered." She froze, then laughed. too loudly. It's just work stuff. Of course, I replied. Work always makes you smile like that. She didn't laugh again. The dinner party. The real turning point came at a dinner party with some mutual friends. Claire had insisted we go. She loved being the star in a room, the perfect hostess even when it wasn't our house. She was in her element, glass of wine in hand, laughter spilling like honey. But I watched closely. She leaned a little too close to her phone when she thought no one was looking. She disappeared to powder her nose 3 times in an hour. At one point, our friend Marcus nudged me and said, "Man, Claire's glowing tonight. You're lucky." I just smiled. Oh, I know. Because luck had nothing to do with it. When dessert came out, Claire started telling a story about her amazing week at work, weaving in just enough vague details to sound convincing. I listened, nodding, while silently picturing Derek's smug face. Then, when the table quieted, I leaned forward and said, "Claire, didn't you want to tell everyone about your big surprise?" She blinked, fork halfway to her mouth. "Surprise?" "Yeah," I said smoothly. "The one you've been planning so carefully. I figured tonight would be perfect to share." The table looked at her expectantly. She stammered something about a promotion possibility and quickly changed the subject. But her cheeks flushed a shade I hadn't seen in years. The cracks were spreading. Behind the curtain, that night, while she showered, I sat on the edge of the bed with her phone in my hands. Don't ask how I got the code. Let's just say you learn a lot about someone when they think you're not paying attention. There it was, a thread of messages to Derek. Plans, laughs, promises, even a joke about me still folding his socks. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just took screenshots, emailed them to myself, and carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. She came out of the bathroom in that same silk robe, humming a tune that wasn't meant for me anymore. "You're quiet tonight," she said, slipping into bed. "Just thinking," I replied. "About what?" I smiled in the dark. "About how much I love surprises." She chuckled nervously, probably thinking I was being romantic. But if she'd looked closely, she'd have seen it. The calm certainty of a man who already knew how the story ended. By the time I fell asleep that night, I wasn't wondering if she'd betray me again. I was wondering just how shocked she'd be when I showed her that the game she thought she was winning had never been hers to begin with. The thing about traps is they work best when the prey never realizes one's been set. Claire thought she was dancing on air, light, free, and untouchable. What she didn't realize was that every step she took only pulled the snare tighter. And I wasn't in any rush to tug the rope. I wanted her to feel comfortable, safe, unaware. Because when the fall came, it was going to hurt. The perfectly ordinary morning. The next Saturday morning, I cooked breakfast. Eggs, toast, bacon. The kind of spread I hadn't bothered with in months. I knew Claire well enough to know that a sudden act of domestic bliss would throw her off balance. "Wow," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "What's the occasion?" I smiled. "No occasion. Just thought you deserved it." Her eyes narrowed for a split second, suspicion flickering like a faulty light bulb. She covered it quickly with a smile. "Well, thank you." We ate in silence. She scrolled her phone under the table, thinking I couldn't tell. I didn't say a word. I just sipped my coffee, nodding at all the right moments, while the plan I'd been sharpening in my head grew teeth. Planting the seed. After breakfast, I casually mentioned, "I might be out of town for a few days next week." "Business trip." She raised an eyebrow. "Where to?" "Chicago," I said smoothly. "Client wants me there in person." "Do you really have to go?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, absolutely," I said, leaning back. "But don't worry. I'll leave you plenty of freedom." She laughed a little too loudly at that, then excused herself to make a call. I could guess who it was. The beauty of it was, there was no business trip. I'd be right there, watching every move she made. The surveillance game. I didn't need private investigators or spy gear worthy of James Bond. All I needed was a bit of foresight and an understanding of Claire's habits. I'd installed a discreet camera in the living room months ago under the guise of keeping an eye on packages. She never asked questions. Her laptop? Synced to the cloud. Her texts? Backed up on the same family account she insisted we share to save money. It was almost too easy. So while she thought she was planning her little romantic getaway with Derek during my supposed trip, I was watching every keystroke, reading every laugh, and listening to every plan. One text from her that week read, "Finally some time without him hovering. Can't wait to just be us." I laughed when I saw it. hovering. I'd been pulling away for months. If anything, she'd mistaken my silence for weakness. Funny thing, silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. Cracks at dinner. Midweek, I suggested we go out to dinner. Just the two of us, I said warmly. She hesitated. Derek had probably already staked a claim on that night, but she couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. Sure, she said. We went to our usual place, a little Italian joint downtown where the owner always greeted us like old friends. Claire wore a dress I hadn't seen in years, the kind that used to be reserved for anniversaries. I knew why. She was trying to balance the scales, cover her tracks, play the doting wife. Halfway through the meal, I leaned forward and asked, Claire, you ever think about what honesty really means? She blinked. What do you mean? Well, I said, twirling my fork in the pasta. Is honesty just about what you say? Or is it about what you choose not to say? She shifted uncomfortably. That's the strange question. Just curious, I said with a smile. You always said we built this marriage on trust. I guess I'm just wondering if that's still true. She forced a laugh. Of course it's true. Good, I said, leaning back. I'd hate to find out otherwise. The rest of the meal was quiet. Not awkward quiet, strategic quiet. She thought she'd passed my little test. What she didn't know was that I wasn't testing her. I was setting the stage for the finale, the final bait. 2 days later, I told her I was leaving early in the morning for Chicago. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and told me to be safe. The moment I was out the door, I parked 2 blocks away and waited. By noon, Derek's car was in the driveway. I didn't barge in. I didn't throw open the door. I let them have their little afternoon of lies. I wanted Claire to feel comfortable, to feel safe enough to let her guard all the way down. Because the thing about liars is, they always reveal more when they think they've won. Sure enough, by that evening, their messages lit up my phone. Claire was practically giddy. He bought the trip. We've got the whole weekend. Finally free. Free. That word stuck in my head. She thought she was free. The conversation. That night, when Derek left, I walked back into the house like I'd just returned from a long drive. Claire was on the couch, hair tousled, robe tied loosely, a glass of wine in her hand. You're back early, she said, eyes wide for just a moment before she forced a smile. Yeah, I said, dropping my keys on the counter. Trip got canceled. She swallowed. Oh, that's unexpected. I sat down across from her, calm as a stone. Funny thing, you know what else is unexpected? Her knuckles whitened around the glass. What? How much people reveal when they think no one's watching. She laughed nervously. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. It means I know, Claire. I know everything. Her mouth opened, then shut. She tried to recover, tried to reach for indignation, maybe even tears. But I didn't give her the chance. Don't bother, I said quietly. I've seen the messages, the photos, the hotel receipts. I even know his favorite cologne now. She froze. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't smug. She wasn't glowing. She was cornered. What do you want? She whispered. I smiled. Oh, Claire, that's the wrong question. The right question is, what do you think I'm going to do? She stared at me, silent. And in that silence, I could see it. The crown slipping, the cracks spreading, the first real fear in her eyes. And I'll be honest, it was beautiful. By the time she went to bed that night, she wasn't sure if her life was about to crumble or if I'd simply vanish into the shadows. That uncertainty, that was step 1 of her punishment. Because the cruelest revenge isn't a single strike. It's a slow unraveling. And Claire had just taken her first step into the dark. People assume revenge is a moment. One grand gesture, one explosive scene where everything breaks at once. Truth is, real revenge isn't a moment. It's a season. You plant it, you water it, and you watch it grow until the roots crack the foundation they thought was unshakable. Claire had no idea she was already living in the middle of mine. The morning after, she came down to breakfast the next morning like a woman walking through a minefield. Smiling too much, asking too many questions, laughing at things that weren't funny. Did you sleep well? She asked, pouring her coffee. Like a rock, I said calmly, not looking up from my paper. That's good. I didn't push, didn't raise my voice. I let her stew in that anxious silence, because the not knowing is always worse than the knowing. And judging by the way she kept glancing at me like I was a ticking clock, she was starting to realize she didn't have control anymore. A subtle shift. The trick wasn't just letting her know I knew. It was making her wonder what else I knew. So, later that week, I started dropping little hints. One evening, she mentioned she was meeting Kelly for drinks. "Tell Derek I said hi," I said casually, sipping my coffee. Her face drained of color. "What?" I smiled. I said tell Kelly I said hi. Maybe I misspoke. She forced a laugh, muttering something about me being tired. But she didn't go out that night. The next day, her phone buzzed on the counter. She rushed to grab it, but I was faster. "Spam?" I asked, holding the phone just out of reach. "Yeah, probably," she said quickly, snatching it from me. I nodded. "Funny how much spam texts these days call you beautiful." She didn't answer, planting doubt. The next Saturday, I suggested we host a small dinner for friends. "Like old times," I said warmly. She hesitated, probably because she didn't want me pulling the rug out from under her in front of an audience. But she couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. So she agreed. We set the table, lit the candles, poured the wine. Our friends laughed, shared stories, and acted like nothing had changed. But Claire? She was tense. I could see her waiting for me to strike. Halfway through dinner, one of our friends asked if we had any vacation plans. Claire smiled brightly. "Not yet, but we're thinking about something soon." I leaned forward, nodding. "Maybe somewhere with a crystal globe." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. The name wasn't random. It was the bar where she and Derek had their first not-so-secret date, a detail I'd picked up through her messages. "Oh," she stammered. "That's a hotel, right?" "Something like that," I said smoothly, taking a sip of wine. No one else noticed, but her hands trembled the rest of the night. The quiet withdrawal. After that, I started disappearing. Not physically, emotionally. She'd come into the room and find me already leaving. She'd ask a question and get a vague answer. She tried to pick fights once or twice, just to feel like she still had a grip on the relationship, but I gave her nothing. And the more nothing I gave her, the more desperate she became. One night, she slid into bed and whispered, "Mark, you know I love you, right?" I looked at her calmly. "Do you?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't move to comfort her. Instead, I rolled over and said, "Good night, Claire." That was the moment she realized she wasn't losing me. She'd already lost me. The business card. A few days later, I left a plain white envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was a business card for a divorce attorney. Nothing else. When she found it, she stared at it like it was a loaded gun. "What's this?" she demanded, voice shaking. "Just something I thought you might want," I said, calmly rinsing my coffee mug. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," I said. "But don't worry, I haven't called him yet. I figured I'd give you the courtesy of being prepared." She exploded then, accusing me of being cold, paranoid, heartless. I let her rant until her voice cracked. Then I stood and said softly, "Claire, I know everything. But I'm not here to argue. I'm here to watch." That shut her up. Her first move. The following week, she tried to flip the script. She cooked dinner, wore the dress I used to love, even put on the perfume she hadn't worn in months. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said, her smile trembling at the edges. "Nice," I replied, cutting into my steak. "But you know, perfume only works if it's not already associated with someone else's cologne." Her knife clattered against the plate. She looked like I'd just punched the air out of her lungs. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered. I shrugged. "Sure you don't." We ate the rest of the meal in silence. The call. That night, she slipped into the bathroom to make a call. She must have thought the running water would cover her voice. It didn't. "I don't know what to do," she whispered urgently. "He knows. I don't know how much, but he knows." Pause. Then Derek's muffled voice. "Then deny everything. He's bluffing." I smiled in the dark. Bluffs only work when the other guy doesn't have all the cards. And I had a full deck. The reveal. 2 days later, I came home early. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone like it might save her. "Everything okay?" I asked. She jumped. "Yeah, fine." I sat down across from her and placed a folder on the table. "Funny thing," I said, sliding it toward her. "I decided to start organizing some of our memories." She opened it. Her eyes widened. Screenshots, photos, emails, receipts. Every single piece of evidence, neatly arranged and waiting for her like a scrapbook from hell. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "I told you, Claire," I said calmly. "I know everything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mark, I can explain." "No need," I interrupted. The beauty of evidence is that it doesn't need your explanation. She sobbed then, begging me to listen, promising it was a mistake, swearing she'd end it. I leaned back in my chair, watching her crumble. Oh, Claire, you don't get it. I don't want an apology. I don't even want you to stop. I want you to wonder every single day what I'm going to do with this. Her face went pale. That's not fair, she whispered. Fair, I repeated, laughing softly. Since when have you cared about fair? And with that, I left the folder on the table, kissed her lightly on the forehead, and walked out the door. Not gone, not leaving, just letting her sit there with the crushing weight of her own choices. Because the cruelest revenge wasn't in the reveal itself. It was in making her live with the knowledge that I was in control now. And she had no idea when, or how, I'd choose to use it. The next week, I barely spoke to Claire. Not because I had nothing to say, but because silence said more than words ever could. She tried everything. Cooking my favorite meals, slipping into bed earlier than usual, even suggesting a spontaneous weekend trip just for us. Each time, I gave her the same calm smile and said, maybe later. She was unraveling. The woman who once strutted through life like a queen was now pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. She needed me to explode, to yell, to accuse. That's how she operated. She thrived on messy drama she could manipulate. Instead, I gave her nothing. And nothing terrified her. The real twist came at a family gathering. My sister's birthday. Claire, ever the actress, showed up in her brightest dress, hugging relatives, laughing at jokes, and clinking glasses like she hadn't set our marriage on fire. She leaned into me during dinner and whispered, "You haven't told them." I looked at her calmly. Not yet. Her smile froze, the kind that cracks around the edges. She spent the rest of the evening glancing at me like a gambler watching the dealer's hand. On the drive home, she finally broke. "Mark," she said, gripping the wheel like it owed her money. "I can't live like this. Tell me what you want. Money? Forgiveness? Just tell me." I looked out the window. "You'll know soon enough." And that was it. By then, Derek had started panicking too. I knew because I intercepted one of his desperate emails. "He's messing with you. He'll get over it. Just stick to the plan." The plan. That was my favorite part. They had a plan to leave me, no doubt, after milking the last ounce of security they could. So I made my own. I invited Claire out for dinner on a Friday night. Same Italian restaurant where I'd once asked her if honesty meant more than just words. She wore red this time, trying to look bold, powerful, in control. "You seem calm," she said nervously, swirling her wine. "I am," I replied. "I've made a decision." She leaned forward. "About us." I smiled. "About everything." Her eyes lit up for the first time in weeks, like maybe she'd won. Maybe I was folding, ready to forgive. She had no idea the check I'd just paid for dinner was the last bill we'd ever split. The next morning, Claire came downstairs to find the house eerily quiet. My slippers gone. My coffee mug gone. The crooked beach photo she always meant to reframe, gone. On the kitchen table sat a plain envelope with her name on it. Inside, divorce papers already filed. A stack of neatly printed screenshots of every lie she thought she'd buried. And a single note in my handwriting. "Don't bother calling Derek. By the time you read this, he'll know I sent the same file to his wife." See, Derek wasn't single. He had his own crown, his own castle, and a wife who wasn't as clueless as Claire thought. All it took was one email from me, and his little empire went up in flames right alongside hers. I didn't slam the door, didn't leave a scene. I just vanished. Clean. Surgical. The last thing I gave her wasn't anger or a fight. It was absence. And that's the part she never saw coming. Because women like Claire, they expect rage. They expect begging. They expect noise. What they don't expect is a man who leaves them with nothing but the echo of their own choices. And that, my friend, was the cruelest revenge of all.